Hey there, true crime fans. Welcome back to For Criming Out Loud and our Crime Me to Sleep Bedtime series. This is episode 6 of Buried Beneath the Boarding House. So if you're new here, make sure you subscribe and go into the playlist to start the book from the beginning. Let's get into episode 6 of Buried Beneath the Boarding House. Women's Work. Dorothea fled to Sacramento the moment that Axel's back was turned, scraping together what was left of their savings as cash and heading for fresh pastures. While she had lost the body that had made her such a hit as a lady of the night, she still had all of the business acumen that had let her excel in criminal enterprises. She got in touch with some of the local girls and put her organizational skills to work, setting them all up in a house where clients could come and go at all hours of the day and receive the kind of service that they were accustomed to. The exact kind of service that she had been providing out of her family home while Axel was away. The early 60s were another good time to be a lady of the night, with all of the social pressures that eventually led to the counterculture driving upstanding citizens into dangerous territory in search of escape. Unfortunately, the success of Dorothea's new venture soon provoked some jealousy from the women whom she had not taken under her wing, and they reported the location of the brothel to the police. Normally, this sort of thing would have been overlooked, but the den of sin just so happened to have been set up in Fulton Street, a relatively nice neighborhood chosen specifically because Dorothea knew that it was less likely to be identified than in a rougher area. Between the location and the tip making the whole operation into an easy win for the Sacramento police, there was enough to spur them into action. An undercover detective entered the building through the bookkeeping operation out front in the guise of a trucker, and Dorothea explained the pricing and respective virtues of the girls at her disposal. When none of them seemed to be taking his fancy, she offered to take care of him for a discount price. Arrested on the spot, along with the rest of her girls, Dorothea was dragged to the nearest police station, where she was questioned for hours about the operation she had set up. Throughout all of the questioning, her court appearances, private counsel with a state-appointed lawyer, and the rest of her life, Dorothea insisted that she had not been working as a lady of the night or madam of the brothel at all, in direct contradiction to all evidence. According to Dorothea, she was merely visiting a friend who happened to live in the building when the policemen arrested her. Unsurprisingly, this did not hold up in court. Dorothea was sentenced to 90 days in jail for the P word and given a pass on the criminal conspiracy charges since it was her first offense, as far as the court knew. Her return to jail was a comfort to Dorothea. All of her worst instincts were repressed by an institutional environment. She was forced into a routine, and her alcohol abuse became impossible. All of the symptoms of her schizophrenia were abated by the circumstances, and while she still told wild stories to her fellow prisoners, she was at least able to keep them all straight in the retellings. It was during this month-and-a-half-long sentence that she set her imagined history in stone and began planning her next moves. She could not be released from Sacramento prison without providing the state with a fixed address, and all of her calls to Axel had gone unanswered. He was actually in the midst of organizing divorce proceedings against her at the time, and had been advised not to respond to her in case she caught wind of the legal action. So at the end of her 90 days in jail, she was arrested immediately for vagrancy and put back into the system to serve another 90 days. She had honestly expected Axel to drop everything and come pick her up so she could resume her life with him and use him as a springboard to her next set of plans. They'd been married for more than a decade by this point, and despite his violence and regular attempts to set her straight, Dorothea genuinely believed that he was still the love-drunk boy she had picked up in a bar. She thought he was still wrapped around her finger, the perfect backup plan when her other schemes went wrong. Now she discovered that she had to navigate life without that safety net. With that in mind, she used her time in prison more profitably. It was now obvious to her that she needed some sort of structure to her life, or she'd risk running entirely off the rails. It was equally obvious that she needed some steady, legitimate income so that she didn't end up in the same dire straits again. She had made a reputation for herself in the prison as a health expert, having memorized drug information and lists of diseases during her holistic doctor phase. She had originally started down that particular rabbit hole of information when seeking a new ailment to claim that she was suffering from, learning throughout her marriages to date that sympathy was very easy to elicit if you were unwell, and so she would browse through medical dictionaries like another woman might browse a clothing catalog. She managed to impress everyone with her knowledge, and when her second sentence was over, some of her new friends put her in touch with their friends in the care industry. Employed as a nurse's aide, Dorothea attended the private homes of the elderly and disabled to help them with activities that they were no longer capable of, administer their medication, and keep them company. It was boring work, even for someone with an imagination as active as Dorothea's, and the pay was a pittance compared to what she used to rake in for doing little more than lying on her back and smiling. Still, it didn't take Dorothea long before she began to recognize the potential perks of the job. Instead of buying food herself, she would cook for herself along with her clients. Technically, she was stealing their food, but most of them appreciated the company so much that it didn't even occur to them to object. Similarly, if some of their medication went missing in the process of Dorothea tidying up the place, they were rarely troubled by it, as the doctor was always ready to prescribe and deliver more. Soon, sharing food progressed to Dorothea dipping into the client's liquor cabinets to keep herself entertained during the long, boring hours when she was meant to be seeing to their needs. In Dorothea's mind, there was only a tiny step from the clients willingly sharing their food to giving her the money to go out and buy food for herself. So if she pocketed any cash that was left lying out while she was cleaning the house, it was hardly any more of an imposition. Throughout it all, she maintained such a cheerful, friendly outlook that none of her clients suspected a thing was awry. They trusted Dorothea completely, and she repaid that trust by robbing them blind at every turn. When their Social Security or pension checks came through, they trusted her to bank them. When they needed money withdrawn from their account to pay for anything, it was Dorothea who they sent out with their pocketbooks. She was careful about how much she took and who she took it from, targeting the most vulnerable and confused of her clients for the worst of her avarice. Surrounded at all times by sickness, Dorothea began developing her own tales of woe to try to elicit sympathy from the social workers she sometimes crossed paths with. She wanted what the dying and disabled had, an endless fount of empathy from everyone that she met. But her desire outstripped her intelligence. First, she would complain of breast cancer, then of a brain tumor, then cancer of the liver. Her story switched so frequently that she would often tell the same person different versions on the same day if they met in different houses. Nobody believed her lies, but they considered her odd bouts of hypochondria to be a minor inconvenience, given the quality of care that she offered. A health obsession was hardly uncommon among those in the healthcare industry, so she barely raised an eyebrow. It was during this period in the early 60s that Axel successfully acquired his divorce from Dorothea, though it seems likely that she wouldn't find out about it for several years to come. Dorothea never removed him from her personalized version of history. Even after the divorce had gone through, she still looked upon Axel kindly, inflating his importance in each retelling, often making him the Swedish ambassador in her tales, although eventually settling on the story that he was the brother of the famous boxer Ingemar Johansson. These years also marked the first time that Dorothea's theoretical knowledge of medicine began seeing some practical applications. Not in any official capacity, of course. She would never have been legally allowed to prescribe medicine, but in her capacity as a thief from the elderly. Using the medication found in their homes, Dorothea doped her clients so that they didn't notice her spending a day lounging around, or so that they would be too dazed to object as she robbed them. When she couldn't trick them into taking extra pills on top of their usual medication, she would grind them up and put them into the food and cocktails that she served, trusting in the spices of her Mexican cuisine or the sharpness of the alcohol to conceal any odd flavors. More than skill, luck kept Dorothea's clients alive and well until 1966, when she finally retired from private nursing before the families of some of her clients were able to connect the dots. Even when a few of her clients had died and autopsies were performed, the medication that showed up in their blood work was all prescribed to them by a doctor. Dorothea was careful, unexpectedly wealthy, and painfully lonely. She longed for companionship beyond the late-night back alley fumbling she'd been able to find outside the bars of Sacramento, and she longed for the feeling of community that she had begun to cultivate when she was married to Axel, a place where she could get all the benefits of being in prison with the comforts of a home. She wanted to be more than just the figure in the background of other people's stories. She wanted the limelight again. With the substantial cash that she had accrued, she was able to rent a large house on the corner of 21st and F Street. While she knew that an application for a boarding house license would be denied to her on the basis of her convictions for soliciting, a boarding house was the next natural step in her career as a professional carer, a way for her to parlay the work that she was doing for individuals into something larger and much more profitable. The passing years had been hard for Dorothea. She had aged badly, easily mistaken for a woman of 50 or 60 by the time she was approaching 40. Even if she could go back to working as a traveling nurse's aide, she didn't really have the energy anymore. Keeping all of her clients under one roof would let her care for far more of them simultaneously, while also giving her the opportunity to steal any money that came in for them at its source. The only trouble was that same exhaustion prevented her from doing the vital work that was required to get the house ready for guests. She needed an able-bodied, younger man to do the heavy lifting and physical labor for her, a man who came cheap since her savings were already dwindling after putting down her deposit on the place. She tried to recruit the local homeless population, but found they were almost too unreliable, preferring to wander off the moment they'd been paid for a day's work, and unwilling to work if money wasn't forthcoming on that first day. Eventually, help came from the most unexpected of places. In her ongoing attempts to slip back into some role within society, Dorothea had been contacting the local Hispanic community, pretending to have Mexican ancestry and spinning her usual web of lies. Her carefully calculated story touched the hearts of many, and so when it became known that she was struggling to get the work on her boarding house completed so that she could take care of the elderly of the city, everyone jumped to her aid. There was a small but growing population of illegal immigrants in the city of Sacramento who were in desperate need of some cash-in-hand work, and they showed up in great numbers to help Dorothea achieve her dreams. But one of those young, lost men set his eyes on her and started dreaming of his own future. Thank you for listening to episode 6 of Buried Beneath the Boarding House. If you're enjoying this true crime story so far, please hit the like button and remember to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Until then, good night.